Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Waste Management Phoenix Open Data Dive Show. How did the cancellation of the fourth round of Pebble Beach affect you? I would love to hear from you all in that regard. I certainly would have liked to have seen it played, as I had a lot of the trailers, sitting in the top 20, but not necessarily in the top 10. So the cancellation hurt me in that regard. Of course, my top play, Patrick Cantlay, did okay, not great. My very unique options didn't come through, so it was not a great weekend for me. But I would love to hear from you all in that regard. How do you feel about the cancellation of the fourth round of Pebble Beach? All of that. And as we move forward and digging into the data for the waste management, what did your research reveal today? Did you make any wagers? Who are you focused on in DFS? All that good stuff. We have a lot to cover, so let's not waste any more time. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research every week on the PGA Tour. I posted some research earlier today regarding every winner going back to the renovation of TPC Scottsdale in 2014 and the players who follow that pattern in the field this week. So if you would like to see that research for this week and every week, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I post my betting cards and my top player usage every week for for the week's tournament, and the top players that I use in DFS and the lineups that I play. So if you would like to see that information, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's X handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a very good way to start your week of research. And he continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of recent form, course history, and all that. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat, as he is gracious enough to host me over there after calls on Wednesday evenings. So make sure you subscribe to that article. Go show him some support, and be able to join us in his Substack chat as we continue the DFS talk over there on Wednesday evenings. And then lastly, we are live. Chat is open on top of what I mentioned before about Pebble Beach and what did your research reveal for this week for the waste management. Who are you targeting? Have you seen all the field changes? All of that good stuff. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 Waste Management Phoenix Open. And we're going to start a little different this evening, considering now that the GCSAA tournament fact sheet is out for the WMPO this week. And the biggest change, as I alluded to last night, is that these are listed as Poa Trivialis Overseed, not Poa Trivialis with rye overseed, but actual Poa Overseed. I do believe these are base Bermuda, although I could be incorrect about that, but very, very interesting surface type here, as it is not very common on the PGA Tour to have Poa Overseed. These greens are double the size of what we were at last week with Pebble Beach. Nothing else has changed in regards to the GCSA tournament fact sheet from last year to this year. Obviously still a Tom Weiskopf design and renovated in 2014. Greens are large, almost 7,100 square feet. Still a par 71 measuring just under 7,300 yards, 6 holes with water in play. But again, that is the biggest change, is this Poa Overseed as opposed to Poa Trivialis and Rye Overseed. So I'm still thinking about how I want to process that in terms of putting. Do I just look at putting in general? Because there are not very many POA overseed courses on the PGA Tour. Like I mentioned, there's La Quinta, TPC Scottsdale, perhaps one other. So I'm still processing how I want to handle that. But as promised, I wanted to give you all the updated GCSA tournament fact sheet since it was not out last night. Now we'll move to where we normally start on a Monday at Windfinder. Just get a feel for what the forecast is calling for early in the week. And it looks potentially like another wet week on the PGA Tour. At least Thursday calls for rain pretty much the majority of the day. We do get a little bit of wind, say around lunch time, at the end of the morning wave, beginning of the afternoon wave, but rain constantly throughout the day is what is in the forecast for Thursday. Now Friday and Saturday have a little bit of rain in the forecast, not too much, but very, very little wind. So in my estimation, I would think the greens are going to play a little bit more receptive because they're generally very, very firm. These could be a little bit more receptive. The greens could be slowed down a little bit due to the amount of rain. It doesn't look like there's a lot of rain leading up to it, except for perhaps maybe Tuesday evening into Wednesday. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that throughout the week. But very little wind other than Thursday. Friday and Saturday look calm, very, very chilly. At least I would expect for Scottsdale in this time of year. You know, high in the mid 40s on Saturday. Sunday looks, a little bit better. Chilly still, maybe a high of 60, but very little wind. So there is the forecast for Scottsdale leading up to our start on Thursday morning. Looks like potentially another wet one on the PGA Tour. So we're going to move over to Fantasy National, and there have been more field changes since last night. I mentioned last night that Davis Riley had withdrawn prior to the show, and then today there have been 3 more changes, or 3 more players dropping out of the field this week. Victor Hovland, Xander, and Patrick Rogers are not playing the Waste Management this week. Hovland, Xander, and Patrick Rogers are all out. There are a few. I can think of a few players that have replaced them. I know Kevin Chappell is getting a sponsor's invite. Sami Valimaki, the very young but very talented Finnish player, is replacing Patrick Rogers. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. It might hit me as we go through some of these things tonight, but wanted to update you with the field changes. Hovland, Xander, Patrick Rogers have all withdrawn, in addition to Davis Riley, who had withdrawn prior to last night's show. But with that, let's just do a quick review here of a couple of different things. First off, our top total performers in the past 36 rounds: JT Poston, Scotty Scheffler, your 2-time defending champion, Eric Cole, Max Homa, Minwoo Lee, Brian Harmon, Adam Scott, Bo Hostler, Ben On, and Lucas Glover. I'm not going to do anything with strokes gained. We could look at strokes gained in calm winds. It's a little bit of a stretch, especially since Thursday looked like the wind could pick up a little bit. But the other 3 days looked like the wind was really, really going to stay low in terms of velocity and gusts and all that stuff. So your top performers in calm winds in the past 36 rounds / 12 months: Max Homa, Eric Cole, Dylan Wu, Doug Gim, Justin Thomas, Keith Mitchell, Lucas Glover, Sung Jae, Ricky Fowler, and Gary Woodland. Your top 10 in terms of calm winds. Of course, nothing to do with course length. This is, almost right smack dab in the middle. It's just under 7,300 yards. So not looking at any long course, not looking at any short courses. And if I had to guess, we would want to look at the easy relative to par instead of difficult. but I personally just don't like looking at average scoring or looking at the average scoring relative to par filter. That's just my own personal preference. However, if you wanted to take a very quick look at that, your top total performers when rounds have been average in relation to par in terms of difficulties: Scotty Scheffler, Eric Cole, Ben On, Denny McCarthy, Ricky, JT, Matt Kuchar, Wyndham Clark, Homa, and Brennan Todd. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump straight into these prior leaderboards, figure out the metrics that seem to consistently be a factor year over year at TPC Scottsdale. Of course, Scotty Scheffler is our two-time defending champion, so that gives us a little bit of an idea in terms of ball striking being a key factor. But Scotty Scheffler actually putt very well here last year. Always going to be near the top in terms of approach. So if we sort, or actually first let's kind of look here. This is the top 19 just due to ties. You only have one player negative in terms of strokes gained approach. Now Scotty Scheffler seems to run away from the field in terms of strokes gained. Jordan Spieth also was very good last year with approach. Around the green also only have a couple of players negative in terms of around the green. Interesting, considering I didn't think it was going to be that much of a factor. And then looking at the data last night in Microsoft Excel, kind of showed that it was. Putting a little bit hit and miss, kind of how I feel about putting. I don't know which direction I want to go with that. And then there was really only one player extremely poor off the tee, was Ricky last year. So if we sort on these statistics, look, you have a clunker of a made cut from Trey Mullinax, who was very good off the tee and did not hit any of his irons and did not putt well at all last year. That's usually a recipe for disaster. He ended up actually making the cut. A decent amount of correlation here, top 5 and a top 10, another top 10, a couple of top 15s. Your winner was a little bit further down and off the tee. The approach, your winner led top 10, top 10, top 10, top 10, top 25, top 15, top 10. So approach was a major factor last year. Big factor. Around the green, you have some pretty stellar finishes, but even against the off the tee, these numbers just aren't as high. Well, they're roughly the same. You get a little bit more in the threes for the off the tee versus the around the green, as you're starting to get into the twos somewhat fairly high, right behind my big noggin. Fairly similar, but again, we saw in the course breakdown last night that off the tee simply just outweighed the around the green by a heavy amount for your top 10s, your top 5s, and your winners. So I'm still leaning towards off the tee there. And then if we look at putting, your winner was somewhat high up here, but it's not tremendously mandatory. Yes, Nick Taylor putt extremely well. John Rahm putt extremely well. But you look at the rest of these standout performers in terms of the putter, a middling from Kevin Tway, a couple of top 25s, another middling, a top 20. You don't have your extremely high leaderboard success, with the exception of Nick Taylor and John Rahm. A little bit further down here, Scotty Scheffler. You're not overloaded with your top 10s and your top 5s here. If we look at 2022 as well with the strokes gained, we'll highlight the top 20 just due to ties. This is where it really starts to make a lot more sense, or at least what I think of in terms of TPC Scottsdale. Not a single player was negative in terms of off the tee 2 years ago. Approach, you only had a couple of players negative. The around the green, much more sporadic. Putting was very sporadic. But take a look again, Scotty Scheffler, for as maligned as he is with the putter, and he's not been a great putter recently, I would say in the past 18 months, he has putt extremely well here at TPC Scottsdale. So there is something about these greens that he is very, very comfortable with. So take a note of that. At least here in the past 2 years, he's gained 5.5 and 6.5. But the big telling thing here, everyone in the top 20 was positive in terms of off the tee. If we sort, now Scotty Scheffler was not the leader, but he did rise to 4th off the tee. John Rahm was a top 10, almost a top 25 from Cam Young. Abraham Answer, middling, but 1st, 3rd, top 15, another 3rd, top 10, top 10. Off the tee was a big factor 2 years ago versus when you look at around the green, you only had a 5.6. You had a couple of missed cuts extremely high up here. You do have some solid finishes. So around the green might play a slight bit of a factor, but certainly not as much as what I think the data was showing last night. Looking at approach, Scotty actually didn't hit his irons all that well that week. He just putt extremely well, and he was a force off the tee. But still pretty solid, minus a couple of these clunkers here. But top 15 from Bubba, top 10 from JT, top 10 from Hideki, some middlings, 3rd to 10th. Approach is still going to be a pretty big factor, and then the putting, a little more correlating than what I would have thought. You have a miscut from Brian Gay, but a top 10, a winner, top 25, a 3rd, a 2nd, a 3rd, a 6th. So what we've seen, the consistency has been in the approach and the off the tee. We'll check one more year in terms of strokes gained. Looks like it was more so in the approach in 2021. If we look at just the top 16 here, only one player negative in approach. Off the tee wasn't too big of a factor, it didn't look like. So don't want to get too into the weeds with that. Darnell, good evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully all has been well. You've been doing well with PGA, with NBA. No football, obviously, this week, but all of your fantasy, DFS, and wager endeavors, hopefully things have been going well. You are ready for the Waste Management, the greenest show on grass this week. So thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I've been doing pretty well, Pebble Beach notwithstanding. Pebble Beach was pretty rough for me. I would have liked for them to have played the 4th round. I had, a few of the trailers, players in the top 15 or top 20. I had a little bit of Wyndham Clark in DFS, but certainly, not to the extent that, would have carried me or anything. Certainly didn't have him outright. Took down NBA tournament on Yahoo 2 nights ago. Well, very good. Congratulations. I do not mess with fantasy NBA, but I know you do, so good job with that. Congratulations with that. All right, so what we have seen for TPC Scottsdale. Look, we're gonna take a look at a lot of the ball striking. That's what it is. So our top off the tee players, the past 36 rounds or 12 months: Scotty Scheffler, Ben On, Kevin Yu, Tyler Duncan, Doug Gim, Cameron Champ, Keith Mitchell, Johnny Vegas, Corey Connors, and Max Homa are your top 10. Skipping Victor, he is withdrawn. Looking to get back on track with PGA. Yeah, like I said, one bad week at Pebble Beach. Although I'm generally not very good with Pebble Beach, and I'm generally not the best with the small fields like the signature events. So I feel much more at home trying to dissect these bigger fields like the Waste Management. I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good with this week. So hopefully we'll get back on the right track, because I had been doing pretty well up until last week. So there are your top off the tee players. Top approach players: Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, Sam Ryder, Gary Woodland, Mark Hubbard, Hideki, Eric Cole, Ches Reavie, Shane Lowry, and Ricky Fowler. Again, skipping Xander and Victor. They have withdrawn. That's why they are starred. I'm going to skip around the green. If it actually ends up in the mixed condition model, we'll take a look at some of the top performers there. I just have my doubts. And again, because of the rarity of what this green surface is with this POA Trivialis overseed, Bermuda base, but POA Trivialis overseed, I'm not going to be looking at a whole lot of courses here. I'm still kind of working my way through what I want to do with putting. So let's just kind of take a look at a big picture view of our top putters in this in the field this week. You have JT Poston, Denny McCarthy, Brian Harmon, Dylan Wu, Taylor Montgomery, Wyndham Clark, Sahith Theegala, Minwoo Lee, Chesson Hadley, and Adam Scott are your top putters overall. What we can do, I suppose, for putting, let's just take a look at TPC Scottsdale by itself. So, by itself, the last 2 years, and that's the furthest back I can go due to the changes with Fantasy National's site. So the most rounds we're going to have is 8. But any player who has 8 rounds, has made the cut both years in the past 2 years. But in the past 2 waste managements, or WMPOs, your top putters, look, number 1, even though as maligned as he is, the number 1 putter at Waste Management the past 2 years has been Scotty Scheffler, Alex Noren, Billy Horschel, Matt Kuchar, Sahith Theegala, Sam Ryder, Zach Johnson, Chesson Hadley, Max Homa, and Peter Malnati. Good evening, P. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. How was your Pebble Beach? It ended up hurting me. I would have liked them to have played the last round, but I understand that the weather was just not cooperative. So it hurt me in the end. Hopefully it did not hurt you. You are ready for the Greenest Show on Grass, a tournament that I believe you have mentioned that you have been to a few times in the past. So very, very jealous of that. Hopefully we have gotten the one bad week out of the way. We're going to build back on the success we had early in the year. But there's your top putters in the past 2 years at TPC Scottsdale. All right, I'm going to prep this for the fairways and greens. We're going to take a look at distance and greens, good drives gained. Again, looking at, let's just look at the top 13 here. That way everything is on your screen. Distance generally is a factor, although there were a few players that were negative. But take a look at the numbers that were negative. -7.5 over 4 rounds is essentially, it's minuscule in terms of being negative to field average. 8.5, much the same. 15.5 isn't bad either. Nick Taylor, never going to be long, so he is going to lack in the distance. But Scheffler and Rahm and Thomas, Day, even though he's getting a little bit up there in age and, of course, with all the injuries, he still moves it off the tee pretty well. Sam Burns and Xander, Wyndham Clark, absolutely. So distance is a factor here. It's a little bit surprising to me to see that no single player was negative in greens. These greens are large, so I don't know how to feel about looking at greens and regulation gained. Generally speaking, when greens are large, it's not something you want to look at, but look at these numbers. 13, 10, 9, 8. Huge numbers. 10th, 6th, 1st, 5th. Start to lose a little bit here, then 2nd and 4th and top 10. A lot going on there with the greens, at least there was last year. Granted, it was a signature event last year, or what they call it last year, premier event, something. But still, I would not have thought greens would be a big deal, but they were last year. If we look at distance, not a whole lot at the extreme top. You do start to gain a little bit of correlation, a 3rd, a 10th, a 14th. A couple of middlings in here, top 15. So distance really wasn't as big a factor as I generally would have thought last year. If we look at 2022, this is where it starts to again, normalize, at least in what I think of TPC Scottsdale. Yes, you still have a few players negative in distance, but Scotty Scheffler and Cantley, Koepka, Xander, all these guys have pretty big numbers here in the distance. JT, even Patton Kazire, Rahm, Mitchell, Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick's never generally very long. He can be, but not the longest. He's up here and has, positive in relation to distance. Green's not as much. If we sort, again, you have a couple of players here that distance is their thing, but third, top 25, close enough. Top 10, top 10, top 10. Miscut from Wyndham, first, third. Still liking the distance, but it is not as correlating as I would have thought based on the data from last night. We look at the greens. Again, a whole lot of pretty solid correlation at the extreme top. Good drives gained. I don't feel like good drives gained are a big deal this week because players aren't necessarily afraid to go into the rough. The rough is not difficult to play out of. It's not punitive. And these greens are rather large. So I have my doubts that good drives gained is the way we want to go. So I'm still looking at driving distance. We'll take a look at greens as well, I suppose. So in the past 36 rounds or the last 12 months, our top driving distance players in the field this week: Cameron Champ, Minwoo Lee, Garrick Higo, Ben On, Adam Scott, Callum Tarrant, Wyndham Clark, Kevin Yu, Joseph Bramlett, and Keith Mitchell. Terms of greens. Come on, sort. Why? There we go. Top greens gained players: Scotty Scheffler and Putnam, Lucas Glover, Tyler Duncan, Ches Reavie, Alex Noren, Corey Connors, Grayson Sigg, JJ Spawn, Davis Thompson. So that's where I'm looking at this week. Distance and greens, although I'm a little bit skeptical of the greens. But again, no real filters to think about. I mean, TBC Scottsdale plays right at 7,300 yards, slightly under it. So I don't want to look at these medium length courses. The wind looks calm, but Thursday looks like it could have some wind in it, so I don't feel great about using calm. And if we go to the tournament factor history, I guess is technically what it's called. Most of the time, these TPC Scottsdale plays to about average. I would say it lends itself to be on the easier end of average, but most of these rounds are average. And I just don't like using the average difficult to par filter. That's just, my preference or my bias. So I just don't see much to do with filtering this week. All right, let's go to scoring. Approach, I'm weighing it more than most this week. Should have more correlation. Yeah, I would tend to agree. But don't overlook off the tee. Off the tee is a humongous factor. In fact, if we look at the course breakdown, we talked about this quite a bit last night. But just a quick review. Of course, if you're putting well, you're going to be rising in your top 10s and 5s and stuff. Yes, still approach. But look how much off the tees outweighing the around the green in your top 10s, and it just continues to distance itself as you move up this leaderboard. Top 5s, and then for your winners, it's drastic. I mean, off the tee almost catches approach for your winners at TPC Scottsdale. It is a major factor. And a lot of the pros talk about this being a first shot course. So do not overlook off the tee this week at all. I think that is going to be a mistake if you do that. All right, looking into scoring, we saw that it was pretty close. Maybe a slight lean to the birdies based on the data in Microsoft Excel. If we look at it, again, every single player in the top 13 positive in both birdies gained and bogey avoidance. Now, Scheffler more bogeys, Nick Taylor more birdies. It looks pretty even. If we sort 2, 20, 23, 6, and then a lot of correlation right behind that. But 20th and 23rd, not exactly the best to be this high up. Bogeys, yeah. First, 5th, 6th, 2nd, 14th, 20th, 20th. But the 20ths and like the 32nd, they're further down. And your winner led in bogey avoidance, which you always like to see. So last night it looked like the slight lean to birdies gained. It's pretty darn close. And that's why this course and this tournament plays to about average. Because they're pretty similar. Now in 2022, 2 years ago, Scottie Scheffler just went bananas with the birdies. Brooks more so in the birdies. But again, it's fairly even. It's fairly even. Your winner led in birdies, 1st, 3rd, 3rd, 10th, 21st, 8th. That's also very strong. Bogeys, 3rd, 8th, 33rd, 2nd, 6th, 38th. Your winner's just further down. But that's still pretty strong. So much like with the putting and what I've talked about a little bit, I don't see much in terms of filtering for this week. Scoring. Don't see much in terms of filtering. So what makes, honestly, a little bit of sense to me is to look at opportunities. Again, these greens are very large. So I think total procs is going to be something which we'll hit on here in a little bit. So why don't we look at opportunities, and with the fact that there is a lot of rain again in the forecast early on in the tournament, Tuesday night into Wednesday, it looks like Thursday is a complete drench. If you missed the forecast, check out the beginning of the show afterwards as I looked at the wind finder forecast. I'm starting to like the idea of looking at opportunities, because that's what happened with Pebble Beach. Guys, the course was so soft that guys could just fire at flags. Now, Pebble Beach was generally receptive, and with all the rain they got, they were getting too much spin. That's not going to be the case at TPC Scottsdale. Generally, these are very firm, so the little bit of rain is probably going to help players just go flag hunting. So I'm really talking myself into these opportunities gained. So in the past 36 rounds or 12 months, your top opportunities gained players have been Scottie Scheffler, JT Poston, Tom Hoge, Hideki, Justin Thomas, Michael Kim, Adam Svensson, Sam Ryder, Eric Cole, and Lee Hodges. Again, skipping Xander, he has withdrawn. So the more I talked myself through this, the more I do like looking at opportunities gained. But we'll take a look at birdies are better and some bogey avoidance. So your top 10 birdies are better gained: Eric Cole, Scheffler, Poston, Adam Scott, Ben On, Taylor Montgomery, Max Homa, Justin Suh, Wyndham Clark, and Sung Jae. Top bogey avoiders: Scheffler, Noren, Harmon, Chesson Hadley, Minwoo Lee, Sam Burns, Ryan Moore, Andrew Putnam, Max Homa, and Grayson Sigg. But I'm really, really liking the idea of the opportunities gained. I don't feel comfortable using the average relative to par filter. These greens are very unique. Again, being Poa Trivialis overseed, not Poa base rye overseed. It's very, very unique on the PGA Tour. I just don't see too much with filters. So just kind of looking at opportunities gained in that regard. All right, let's look at proximity. We'll go to last year's proximity. Kind of what I thought here. I mean, you got a couple of players that aren't necessarily the highest in terms of proximity. Nick Taylor was really bad. Sung Jae wasn't very good. J Day was essentially field average. You got some massive numbers in here in terms of total procs, which makes a lot of sense, again, because these greens are so large. 241, a 502, a 478, 451. And just as a reminder for myself, the top approach shot range, or the most common approach shot range here at TPC Scottsdale, appears to be the 150 to 175. Take a look. Only one player was negative in the top 13 from 150 to 175. So that's very, very strong correlation between that, between those two facts or facets of data there. If we sort, 61st from Nate Lashley is not the greatest, but a 3rd, 6th, 10th, 20th. Your winner pretty high in the total procs. I will go through each of these ranges just to see if something really stands out. Not a whole lot here. You have a lot of missed cuts pretty high, but look at the 100 to 125. Middling from Rory, top 25. Your winner was very high in the 100 to 125. Top 15, a top 10. It's interesting. I wouldn't go too crazy with it, but kind of interesting to note. Okay, look at this. Yes, a 50th from Lucas Herbert isn't great, but 3rd and a 6th and a top 25 and a top 15 and a top 10 and a top 5 and a top 10. 125 to 150 was very strong last year as well. Your winner led from 150 to 175. Okay. You also have some premier performances sandwiched with some awful ones and missed cuts. So take the good with the bad. Cut making, but nothing great. Cut making and some decent performances. Top 15s in here. Really, it looks like the standouts were perhaps the 150 to 175 because of Scotty leading it. And the 125 to 150 last year was pretty strong. Let's see if 2022 gives us any clearer picture or muddies the waters even more. Again, looking at the top 13, look, total procs is still something that I these numbers are pretty big in here for the total procs. Now, the specific ranges don't look like much in here. It looks like they're all over the place, but total procs looks like it could be something, which would make a lot of sense, again, because these greens are so big. We sort on it. Not the strongest. You have a few good finishes here. 125 to 150. Not as much. 150 to 175. Cut making. Cut making with, a miscut in here. I'm still thinking it's total procs. You might disagree, but I'm leaning towards total procs. So, in the interest of time, because there's a lot that I still want to cover, your top total procs players in the field this week, the last 36 rounds: Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, Tom Kim, Ches Reavie, Adam Svensson, J.J. Spawn, Ryan Moore, Hideki, Charlie Hoffman, and Brendan Todd. Scheffler's been up here a lot. Expect him to be very, very chalky, and there's a reason why he opened at 5-1 or whatever ridiculous number that he opened at. All right, moving to pars 3s, 4s, and 5s. We saw this last night. I highly doubt I go into much with the par 3s. They just did not appear to factor in all that much. If there is a range, it would be the 175 to 200. Scotty played them okay, but there's not a lot of big numbers in here other than Billy Horschel. You got some missed cuts fairly high. They just don't appear to have much of a factor. They just don't. 175 to 200 would be the range, I think. But even so, that's very strong correlation, but they're just not big numbers in here. 3.8 from Finau is the highest. 2.8, 1.8, So instead, let's take a look at par 4s. Because that's a stupid number. 17 and a half strokes gained on these par 4s from Scotty. Just stupid video game numbers. Nick Taylor was also very good. 12 and a half would generally probably lead a category. Instead, he's coming in runner-up because of that. Now, Scotty was much better at the 450 to 5s. Pretty even here. If we sort, first, second, fifth, sixth, sixth, fourth, sixth. I would say that's pretty strong correlation. Your third is all the way down here in the top 12. Par 4 is going to be a big thing. Yes, there is one drivable par 4. You don't want to ignore it, but the more I have thought about it, the more I think I'm just going to be looking at these two specific ranges, since 5 of the 11 par 4s fall to here and 5 fall to here. And then if we look at 2 years ago, Scotty's first win, again, putting up stupid video game numbers, 12.1, 10.1 from Noren. Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of in these two ranges of par 4s. 5.1 lead. Now, Bo Hostler's a miscut, but around him, 1st, 3rd, 8th, 10th, 14th, 2nd, 10th, 4th, 14th, 6th, 1st, 14th, 3rd. You had more of your cut making in the 450 to 5. So, strong. Extremely strong. So, par 4s, your top 400 to 450 par 4 players in the field this week: Minwoo Lee, Ben On, Scotty Scheffler, Adam Scott, Bo Hostler, Ryan Moore, Max Homa, Lucas Glover, Tom Kim, and Justin Thomas. The only one that's top 10 in both of the ranges here at TPC Scottsdale is Bo Hostler. He's 5th in both 400 to 450, 450 to 5. In your longer par 4s, look, the top 2 players are already out. So Eric Cole now becomes your number 1 player in 450 to 5 par 4s. Ryan Fox, Bo Hostler's now 3rd. Denny McCarthy, Wyndham Clark, Chesson Hadley, Thomas Dietrich, Andrew Putnam, Michael Kim, and Johnny Vegas. And then we'll round this out with par 5s. Just to make this easy. Gosh dang, I went to par 4s again, didn't I? I did. Stupid. Par 5s. Every single par 5 on the scorecard measures 550 to 6. You see they do get moved around, but due to tees and pin placements and whatnot, but all of them fall between 550 and 6 on the scorecard. Now, Scotty surprisingly didn't play them particularly well last year, but if you sort on it, other than Scotty, you got a lot of correlation up here. Just took down the NHL slate on Yahoo. Should make my own channel. Well, hockey is something that I know very, very little about. I can at least follow basketball and NBA and stuff. I know zilch about hockey. So, all the power to you, Darnell. Well done. Yeah. Par 5s weren't actually terribly too much last year. They were a bigger deal in 2022. Got lucky. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. But all of the par 5s measure 550 to 6, so that's where we're going to look. I'm actually going to close this out. Our top par 5 performers from 550 to 600 yards in the field this week: Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler, Aaron Rai, Lee Hodges, Davis Thompson, Doug Gim, Thomas Dietrich, Max Homa, Ben Griffin, and Wyndham Clark. All right, let's start digging into a whole lot of the weeds of the data, as they say. I always like to look at my previous year's mixed condition model, get a feel for what I was looking at, how it did results based. Now, last week at Pebble Beach, one of the reasons why I wasn't very confident, it was just a very bad mixed condition model, and it turned out to be bad results, all of that. Now, the waste management, a little bit different story. We look at my top 20, I had 4 missed cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4 of my top 20 missed the cut. I aim for about 4 to 5, so that's very acceptable in my opinion. 20% of the top 20 missed the cut. It's golf thing, crazy things happen. My winner, not necessarily the highest. Perhaps I should have had him a little bit higher, but he was still in the top 20. Of course, John Rahm was very popular. I had a pretty unique Ricky Fowler who finished 10th. Keegan top 20, pretty unique. Wyndham Clark was 5.5% top 10. So I feel pretty good with this. Obviously, there's room for improvement. You would like to have no miscuts in your top 20 and all that. But I feel pretty good with the results here. Feel pretty good. So what did we look at? I had 15% off the tee. Makes a lot of sense. I've focused on off the tee a lot this week. I'm still going to continue to do that, probably into tomorrow. 15% in the 450 to 500 yard par 5s. That makes a lot of sense considering what we just saw on the prior leaderboards. Par 5s, 550 to 6, 15%. 10% approach. I think this is probably a little light to your point earlier in the show, Darnell. Probably needs to be upped a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy with it because I do feel like this is a first shot course, but I do think approach is supposed to be a little bit more important than this. I looked at bogey avoidance last year as opposed to the birdies gained. Okay. Probably where I'm leaning right now, but I'm also starting to think about opportunities gained. Looked at 10% driving distance. I looked at 10% proximity. Total procs. Makes a lot of sense. Now, I had 10% in par 4, so I had an extreme amount of weight into these 450 to 500 yard par 4s. I'm starting to lean to just looking at 450 to 5 and 400 to 450 par 4s and kind of neglecting the drivable par 4. I know you don't want to ignore that hole, but man, when we go to the really detailed data around TPC Scottsdale, you'll see why I'm starting to lean that way. But I had 10% par 4s, and then I had 5% on fast Bermuda. Not correct, I don't think. But I don't know what kind of putting I'm going to look at this week. I might not look at putting, to be honest with you. Or if I do, it might be putting specifically at TPC Scottsdale. I'm thrown for a loop based on that very, very unique surface type. So how predictive were these? Actually not too bad. That's why I feel pretty confident, much, much more confident than I was last week at Pebble Beach. 51, not great, but it's not terrible. 49, a 48. 55, a little bit less so. That's why I don't want to get too crazy with the approach and overweight it, because the off the tee was a little bit stronger. And look at the bogey avoidance. Bogey avoidance was a 36. That is amazing in terms of predictability. Driving distance was also a pretty darn big factor, or at least predictable. Now the total proc's not great, and the putting was not great. So I'm starting to think that I can just throw out the putting, not look at any putting in the mixed condition model, or be very, very narrow, like look at just TPC Scottsdale putting. Now, I do like the idea of total procs, but it was one of the worst in terms of predictability last year, so it kind of throws me for a loop. But we're looking at a lot of the same things. I mean, a heavy focus on off the tee, heavy focus on this range of par 4s, heavy focus on this range of par 5s, perhaps a little bit of bogey avoidance. I'm also thinking and leaning towards opportunities gained this year, and of course distance. All right, so there was the mixed condition model. Obviously room for improvement, but I feel pretty good with it. I feel pretty good with that one. Yeah, I'll save that. So now let's go to the weeds of the data for TPC Scottsdale. We look at strokes gained, and this really will emphasize how much the off the tee is carrying more so than the around the green. 1.7 versus a 1.2, pretty big. Like at the Genesis next week, around the green's actually more than off the tee. Pebble Beach was pretty even, but around the green was more than the off the tee. You see at the Farmers, a place where driving is a pretty big deal. It's not as much of a gap between the off the tee and around the green. So Phoenix, and this is why I was really trying to emphasize and hammer that point home earlier, Darnell, do not overlook off the tee. It is a huge factor at Phoenix or at TPC Scottsdale. Of course, approach, we're not going to ignore. It's been very, very consistent. Putting's been somewhat a strong factor. It says it's been just as much as approach. I'm just not as confident in what filter to use. And for as consistent as the approach has been year over year, the putting's been pretty sporadic. You've got some low outliers, you've got some high outliers. So it's been pretty sporadic. So I'm going to be focused on the ball striking. We go into distance and greens. Look, that's a very low outlier. And just to give you a look from last night, and last night's show, gosh dang it, Phoenix. Look at the distance. 54%. More important, that's including this low outlier. So that number is just going to rise if we take out the low outlier. Distance is a big factor. I still believe distance is going to be a big factor. You see fairways were actually a negative last year for the players that finished in the top 30. They're generally not a big factor at all. The way that changes, if that forecast holds and they get Scottsdale gets the rain that they're forecasted to get Wednesday and in Thursday, fairways could matter on Thursday for ball in hand, but I'm still looking more so into the distance. Greens look like a big number, but I want you to notice they've slowly been deteriorating in terms of importance year over year. So take that for what you will. I don't think I'm going to put a whole lot into it. Birdies and bogeys. Now, the birdies gained are generally going to have the higher raw number usually. You got an extremely high outlier here. Extremely high. Whereas the bogey avoidance has been much, much more consistent. And I think that's why I've liked the bogey avoidance. And why I used it last year. But I'm still kind of looking at the opportunities. All right, this is where digging into the data for a specific course really comes in handy. Looking at the par 3s, the par 4s, the par 5s. Look at par 3s, total par 3s are at a 1.24. It's not very much. Like even Pebble Beach, who don't focus on the par 3s, was higher. The Genesis is, a quarter of a shot higher. Honda's more than a quarter of a shot higher. They just don't matter here at Phoenix. You take all of the par 3s, 1.24, they still don't equal the 2 lengths of par 4s that are most prevalent here. And it's about the same as just the length of par 5s. So I don't see much in the par 3s. If there's a range that you want to look at, it's the 175 to 200. I wouldn't go crazy with it. I would just look at total par 3s and I wouldn't do much of it. But I don't think I'm doing anything with par 3s this week. Instead, I'm going to have a lot of weight in these par 4s. Again, 1.49, 2.47. More than half of your strokes gained in par 4s come into this range. We've seen Scotty Scheffler play them well both years. So we're going to have continued emphasis on this. I really thought this number would have been higher. That's why I was thinking about just looking at these two numbers, or these two ranges, excuse me. But 1.5 out of 4.75 really doesn't constitute or justify looking at that range by itself. So perhaps it was correct, like last year, to look at the 450 to 500 by themselves and then just put a little bit in all par 4s. Perhaps that's the right way to go about it, considering that this is almost one full shot more than that range. I thought they were much closer together. But clearly you can see the 450 to 5s are carrying in a humongous amount of weight in the par 4s. And then for the par 5s, gosh dang it, I went all the way up to the Fortinet. It's stupid. For Phoenix, 1.63 total in the par 5s. 75% of it comes from 550 to 600. You're just looking at 550 to 600. That's just kind of where you're at. So there's the benefit of looking at TPC Scottsdale data in the weeds, if you will, or diving deep into them to really hammer which lengths of par 5s and par 4s and par 3s you want to look at. as well as looking at which strokes gained generally for our top 30 contribute the most. So we're going to end the show off looking at the early look file. Let's see the players in the past 5 years who have performed the best at these various metrics that we are going to focus on this week. So we're going to start with off the tee. And the players who have been the best off the tee the past 5 years at TPC Scottsdale. Johnny Vegas leading off the tee, 2 for 2. Keith Mitchell is 4 for 5 off the tee. He hasn't done much else well here, but he has been very good off the tee here. Cameron Young, kind of his games. There's Scott Scheffler, 3 for 4, 2-time defending champion. Corey Connors also has been very good off the tee here. Justin Thomas, look at all the ball striking there. I mean, Justin Thomas has just played TPC Scottsdale amazingly the past 5 years. Grillo has actually been very good off the tee. It's the putter which has killed him. His putter is getting better. So maybe an interesting name there if he continues the form with the off the tee. Sungjae's been good. And Luke List, a little bit less in terms of performance, but been good off the tee. Hideki, 5 for 5. KH Lee, 3 for 4. Tagala, 2 for 2. Max Homa, 5 for 5. So there's some of your top performers in terms of off the tee in the past 5 years. Here at Scottsdale, we go to approach. You definitely don't want to ignore the irons. Your top approach players at Scottsdale in the past 5 years. Bramlett, just 1 year. Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth. Ricky's also been very good. Remember, champion in 2019 here. Bud Cauley's 2 for 2 here. Scotty Scheffler, your 2-time defending champion. Hideki, has been very good with the irons and around the green here. Max Homa. Woodland, a former champion here as well. 3 for 5. Nate Lashley, 3 for 4. Noren and Clark. Clark's been actually very good. He's actually not been very good off the tee here, but look, elsewhere, approach, around the green, and putting, he's been very good. He's had a lot of success. So if he reverts to his normal self, which he's an off the tee based player, look out for Wyndham Clark again. There's Uncle Luke for you, P. Pretty good with the irons and pretty shit everywhere else. That's why he's 0 for 3 here at Scottsdale. But anytime you can throw Uncle Luke into a mention, kind of feel like you need to. There's your top approach players, top putters. We'll see how much this changes from the past 2 years, what we did at Fantasy National, to the past 5 years. Let's see how much this changes. I'm actually kind of interested. Yeah. So Scotty Scheffler falls to 4th best when going back the full 5 years as opposed to just 2 like we can only do now in Fantasy National. Sahith Theegala actually is the best in the past 5 years. Billy Horschel, 5 for 5. Again, these are Bermuda base, so makes some sense. Brendan Todd, a premier putter in general. Alex Noren's a good putter. Chesson Hadley, 3 for 4. Matt Kuchar, 4 for 5. Poston, 4 for 5. Ricky. Tom Hoge is putt well here. He generally does not putt well, so take a note of that. Wyndham Clark, we talked about. Burns generally is putt well here. He's got some Jekyll and Hyde finishes, missed cuts and top performances. You see, he's only made the cut 2 of the past 5 years, but his average finish is actually not terrible. Bo Hostler's putt well here. Max Homa, Zach Johnson is putt well here. There's JT, Sungjae, and on down. All right, we will go to. Yeah, we'll go ahead and hit driving distance just really quick. Driving distance. So your top driving distance players the past 5 years here at Scottsdale. Bramlett, again, only 1 year. Wyndham Clark. Cam Champ. Now he's only 1 for 3, not a lot in terms of performance, but anytime distance is a factor, you got to think about Cam Champ. Cameron Young, Johnny Vegas, Gary Woodland, Luke List. J.B. Holmes, Keith Mitchell, Ben On, Justin Thomas, and Scotty Scheffler. Matt Wallace has got some distance here, but terrible finishes. Spieth got some distance here. Ricky, Stuart Sink. All right. I'm going to skip over all of the scoring and par threes. Let's just go straight to the par fours. 450 to 500. Top performers at those range of par fours. Two-time defending champion is number one. Pretty solid. Justin Thomas, your strokes gained total leader the past 5 years. Those two are running away from the rest of this group in terms of the performance on par fours, 450 to 500. And look at the amount of success they've had here. That's why this is going to be a pretty heavy part of the mixed condition model. Ben On, 3 for 3. Alex Noren, JT Poston, Sung Jae, Max Homa played extremely well on these par fours, and you see the level of success they've had. Not missed a cut. Average finish inside the top 20, inside the top 25. Justin Thomas, average finish 6th. Scheffler's your two-time defending champion. This number is so high because he missed the cut his first try, then goes 7th, 1st, and 1st. So lots of correlation here with this 450 to 5 par fours, and then we're going to end the show off looking at the 550 to 600 par fives and who has played those the best. Matt Fitzpatrick, 2 for 2 with an average finish top 20. So interesting to note. Johnny Vegas, Grayson Murray, Jordan Spieth, Sung Jae, Scotty Scheffler. A little bit further down, there's Doug Gim, played him well. Corey Connors, Keith Mitchell, Hideki, 5 for 5, average finish inside the top 25. Sam Burns, again, we've talked about not kind of Jekyll and Hyde. Scott Stallings, 3 for 4. Hadley, 3 for 4. Berger's played the par 5s well, but not a lot of success to show for it. Justin Thomas, Martin Laird. All right, so I'll bring back or sort this back on the best average finish. And that's going to be the show this evening. Thanks to Darnell and P for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. You all have supported the channel for a long time. Can't thank you all enough for that. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. Congratulations, Darnell, on fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey. And if you've had success, feel free to let me know in chat. Reach out to me on social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have had success. We had a couple of hits last week, or I guess now 2 weeks ago, at the Farmers for Provone. So feel free to reach out and let me know. I would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. But thanks for all the support. I love it. Just a quick reminder for Wednesday night, the DFS Tactics show, like it will be for the entirety of February, the DFS Tactics show will be at 10 p.m. Eastern. I just have scheduling conflicts throughout February on Wednesdays. Can't get around it. So 10 p.m. Eastern for the DFS Tactics show on Wednesday. But for all of the wagers you've made so far this week for the WMPO, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the WMPO, and until I see you Wednesday night at 10 p.m. for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.